Hi, I'm Plain Archer Chafin. Plain Archer is our team name in a business called Empower Network that we are going to be building in New Zealand. My wife and I are the leaders of this team, so I wanted to start telling you our stories so you could get to know us a little better and understand that we are here to help you, and we've been through things like you would have been through. The story I'm about to tell you is a story written by my wife a few weeks ago. It's a testimony of her life. Her name is Carla, and I love her dearly. Please understand she's been very nice to me in this story. I have in fact hurt her as much as some of the people you're about to hear about, and yet she loves me regardless and unconditionally. So this is her story. How do I begin to tell the story that is me? I was born into a family already broken. My father was never married to my mother. In fact, they only had intercourse once. I was the byproduct, if you will, of their union. I do not believe for 1 minute I was a mistake. I was meant to have life. It was a gift from the Creator. My mother raised me on her own for the first 4.5 years with no guidance from family. She struggled. She had multiple pregnancies after my birth. I had a brother born into our little family 3.5 years after myself. Being that my mother was only 17 when I was born, a young woman, lost and lonely, she looked for love in all the wrong places and fell pregnant one other time, this time with twins. Already in a difficult situation, having my brother and me, she had an abortion. Her struggles were seen as weakness by her family. They then tried to help. They took my brother and I away from her, and we were put up for adoption. I was 4.5, and my brother 1 year old. I remember being put into foster care for a time. While the adoption was being processed, they were nice enough, I think. The day of my adoption came about, and I was very excited about this new family. I really couldn't tell you why I was excited, just that I was. My new family showed up that day to take me to my new home with them. Little did I know that my life would take a turn for the worse. Being given up for adoption leaves a person with certain thoughts and feelings that can dictate how you behave. I wasn't a naughty girl, just very confused and scared, I guess. My little brother had been adopted out to a different family, and I very rarely saw him again. The family that adopted me had a son that was a year older than me. My first impression of him was one of hate towards myself. He hid behind the lounge suite and wouldn't come out. He said he didn't like me and that he never wanted a sister. He wanted a brother. This was very daunting for a little girl to take, being that I had been very excited to begin with a couple of hours earlier. My behaviour started to change. I became angry, scared, and I began to lie, much to the mother's disappointment. She was expecting a beautiful child that I believe is the dream of every mother. What she didn't bank on was major issues that come with being given up. Feelings like neglect and ugliness, sadness and hopelessness, etc. My behaviour brought the worst out in her. She was confused and at a loss. She had no idea how to deal with my issues. So, she leaned on her own knowledge and learnings. She tried to deal with me using discipline. I believe this is where it all went wrong. She became angry and very frustrated. I would be hit very hard with either hand or belt, and only after then would she tell me that she loved me. This left me with a feeling of hate and anger towards the adults in my life. I felt unprotected and hurt. I couldn't trust anything around me. There was no stability, none of the comfort that should be given to a little girl. The father worked hard, and to this day I don't know if he really knew the extent of my torment. I felt like an interloper, unwanted and unliked. I was completely alone. To this day I struggle with feelings of mistrust and loneliness. I became a compulsive liar and had lots of funny eating habits. I could never understand why I had become this way. I tried so hard to be the daughter she wanted me to be. I failed at every turn though. It was hardest when I was little, living in this family. I had a little self-control, as all children do. It was expected though, self-control that is. If I failed, I was beaten with belts, backhanded. Eventually I progressed to the jug cord for punishment. I can tell you now that this hurt like you wouldn't believe, and left me with huge welts across my legs, for she was very careful to hit me where they couldn't be seen, even going to the extent of writing letters of excuse for swimming sports and physical education, etc., so the wounds would not be seen by the teachers. Then one day she went over the top. Letting her anger get the better of her, she threw me into a wooden glory box. It's something a lady puts linen and such for her wedding day. This split my head open, and I had to go to the hospital. I received 6 stitches. I was told to lie to the doctors about how I received the injury. I told them I had tripped over and knocked my head myself. This was all over me, not sitting still while she did my hair. As I got older, things started to change. I still got punished, but the ways changed from hitting to essays and lines and groundings. There was a period where I was grounded for 2 years. Every time I wanted to go somewhere, the answer was no. When I was around 12, the mother was diagnosed with cancer. She had treatments such as radiation and went on a very strict diet. This was very hard on her relationship with her husband, and eventually they got a divorce. My brother went to live with my mother, and I think I lived with my father for a while. I really don't remember. I do remember, however, eventually living with the mother. She began a new relationship, went into remission with the cancer, and was happy, I believe, for the most part. We shifted cities and began a new life with her new partner. We were all happy in our new life. Sure, we still had issues, but they were normal issues, teenage ones like smoking and talking back, fighting with your siblings. The mother was happy in the relationship, therefore handled the issues better. She started telling me she loved me a lot. There didn't have to be anger beforehand. We were becoming friends and confidants to each other. She was a happier person. This is how it was for at least a year. And then once before, things changed for the worse. They had gone away for the weekend, my mother and her partner. My brother and I stayed at one of their friends' houses. I remember waking up in the middle of the night with a feeling of foreboding. I just knew something was wrong. Very wrong. It must have been about 10 minutes later there was a knock at the door. The couple we were staying with answered the door, and it was the police. There had been an accident. My mother was killed instantly by a drunk driver, and her partner was in serious condition in hospital. I was shocked and horrified. This happens to other people, I remember thinking, not us. She was gone. I would never see her again. What hurt the most, and still does, is that we were becoming very close. My world was completely shattered in that instant. It literally broke apart. I struggled with the littlest things, like going to school, waking up. Sometimes even breathing was hard. I wanted her back more than anything. I remember wishing the world would stop so I could get off. All my friends' lives continued on as normal, and here I was going through one of the hardest things I had ever lived through. I was 15, and looking for her at every turn, thinking that I had seen her at certain times too. I had dreams about her, of flying through heaven, shopping in the biggest malls you have ever seen. It was one of her favourite things to do. I also dreamt of the car accident, and I still remember those dreams today, 22 years later. I continued to live with her partner, who himself was struggling to cope. One night he had friends stay over, and I had to sleep in his bed with him. As the visitors used my bed, it was a double bed. That night he raped me. The next morning he told me never to let that happen again. I was 15. I went to school a couple of days later and told my dean. She then contacted the police and I had to make a statement. A very horrible experience. It was decided that I would go and live with my natural mother. She came and got me within the week. I wish I could say that this was good to be with her again, but it wasn't. She had lost her husband in January or February, and I had lost my mother in June the same year, so we were both very hurt and shocked. Bad cocktail of female emotions. We treated each other very badly. We were working out of our pain and anguish. If I thought I was angry before, I had another thing coming. I was living in perpetual fury. I was angry with everyone, God especially, which is funny considering I never believed in Him. I acted out my anger and started to cause fights, not just verbal but physical too, at home and at school. I began to wonder about my natural father and asked if I could be introduced to him. My natural mother set up the meeting and it went fine. He thought I was wonderful. A princess were his words. It felt good hearing those words. I decided to go and live with him because I still wasn't getting on with my mother. I think I lived there on and off for about 2 years. He had another family, 2 boys and a girl, and was married. The mother and daughter, I know, struggled having me around. Understandable. It was hard for me in those days. I was still grieving for my mother and the family I had lost. I ended up getting pregnant at the age of 17, much to everyone's disappointment. I shifted into my own place with the baby's father and tried to begin a family of my own. It didn't work. He wanted to go out with his mates all the time and I wanted him to stay at home all the time. It's a bad mix. Eventually I left him and tried to raise the baby on my own. I can't say that I did a good job, sadly. I was too young and was still very broken inside. I was angry with the child as she became older and started doing naughty things as kids do. I didn't have the patience or the knowledge to be a good mum. I raised her as I was raised, with punishments, and it just made things worse. I began to wonder if this was all life had to offer. I had always felt there was something else, someone watching. As a little girl, I would often talk and sing to this energy that I felt all around me. I shifted out of town with my own child, with my family, and a friend of mine. I knew no one except them. I became very lonely and depressed. One day I hit rock bottom, stood in the street, raised my hands to God, and challenged Him, I guess you could say. I was practicing Wicca at the time, so was aware of the spirit realm. 3 days later, I think, I was in bed questioning life when I heard my name being spoken 3 times. It scared me and I didn't answer. I just let it be. A few months later, I went back to my hometown for my birthday and Christmas with the friend I moved away with. Her brother had just got back into the country as well. We hit it off, and on Christmas Day we started seeing each other. He started to teach me about God and the plan He has for each of us. I listened with an open heart because of my love for this man. Because of this I came to believe in heaven and our God. This is where my life starts to change for the good. And it hasn't been easy at all, but I have an understanding now that I've never had before. And because of this I am learning more each day and every day with the Lord's help. I believe none of us are mistakes. We are all planned by the Almighty for His joy and His happiness, so He could have someone to love Him. I love Him dearly and try to live every day in His sight. He has changed things in me that I never thought would change. I am not that person I was anymore. I changed my parenting skills with His help and guidance. I owe Him everything because He had time for me when hardly anyone else did. He has given me back my reason for living, to love Him and His creation, man and earth alike. His wisdoms are what keeps me going when I feel all else is going to fail. I know He loves me with such passion, and that my lifeline, my serenity, I know He will never let me down. Why? because He is my true Father, for whom I was created, and I don't belong to anyone but Him. And that's the end of the story my wife shared with me recently. Now it continues on from there, and I'd love to tell you that I've been a great husband and have made things so much better for my wife since then, but in all honesty, I haven't. Like I said at the beginning, I've let her down as much as some of the people that you heard of in that story. And yet my wife has loved me unconditionally through the 15 years of our marriage. Because of her, I've been inspired to change my life and driven to seek something better. And it's because of that that I found Empower Network and have started this team, Plain Archer, which was another one of her inspirations. And I know I'm going to help a lot of people in the future. I know both her and I are, the Bible says, by the words of their testimonies. And we both have testimonies. We've been through things that a lot of people haven't been through. And with the help of Empower Network and the great team that we're involved in here, we have turned our life around. I'll get more into the details than that when I tell you my story. But for now, I just want to say thank you for listening. And if you're looking for a way to change your life, to build a future for yourself and your family, where you thought there was no hope before, I want to encourage you to click onto the link below this video and get started today. Join the inner circle. Start listening to the audios. It's not about making money. It's about changing the world, one soul at a time. Starting with mine, starting with yours. Thank you.